The morning began the way it always did. I woke before the gulls and let the sea air drift through my kitchen window. My roses, lined up in chipped terracotta pots along the sill, needed watering, and I hummed to myself as I poured the can carefully. One root at a time. It was the rhythm of a quiet life, a rhythm I thought nothing could disturb. That was when I heard it, the irregular drip from upstairs. Not the gentle, predictable drop of a leaky faucet, but something uneven, like a heartbeat gone wrong. I tilted my head, listening. The sound seemed to travel down through the walls and land with a faint splatter on the dining room ceiling. "Maris," I called up the staircase, hoping my daughter had already noticed. She had moved back 6 months ago, carrying her heartbreak in suitcases, and though we lived under the same roof again, she often kept to herself. "Do you hear that leak?" Her door creaked open, and her voice floated down, sharp with annoyance. "It's nothing. Mom, just let it be. I'll take care of it." Then the door slammed. I frowned. She had never been handy, and I wasn't about to wait for water damage to spread. I found an old card stuck in the back of my address book and called the number listed under plumbing. A man answered on the second ring, voice calm and professional. "This is Diego." When he arrived, toolbox in hand, he didn't stride straight to the ceiling like most repairmen would. Instead, he stopped in the doorway, sniffing the air. "Do you keep strong cleaners here?" he asked. "Only vinegar and soap," I replied. He touched the wall near the damp patch, then tilted his head toward the hallway vent. A faint whir carried through, though the fan should have been off. His brow furrowed. Strange. Diego climbed the step stool and pressed against the paneling. Something crackled as he shifted a cabinet aside, and a folded paper slipped free, falling at his feet. He bent to pick it up. I watched his expression change from curiosity to something else, entirely alarm. It was an invoice, bulk chemical purchase, signed with my daughter's name. Diego's hand shook as he folded it again and slipped it into his pocket. He looked at me, his face drained of color. "Ma'am," he whispered, "you should pack a bag." I felt the air catch in my chest as he nodded toward the basement door. I followed Diego down the creaking wooden stairs, the air turning cooler with each step. The familiar dampness of the basement wrapped around me, tinged with something sharp I couldn't place. Diego's flashlight swept across the concrete walls, over the washer and dryer, until it stopped behind the old furnace. "Here," he said quietly. I leaned closer. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary tangle of pipes. But when Diego crouched and moved a panel aside, my heart stuttered. Hidden in the shadows was a rig of thin plastic tubing connected to a metal box the size of a bread loaf. Small canisters, each marked with symbols I didn't recognize. Fed into the lines, a digital timer blinked with silent red numbers. I shook my head. That has to be part of the renovation. 2 years ago, my daughter insisted we redo the bathroom. She told me not to worry about the technical things. Maybe this was installed then? Diego stood slowly, his face grave. "Ma'am, I've worked plumbing for over 30 years. This isn't water filtration. It isn't heating or ventilation. Someone set this up on purpose. And look," he traced one of the tubes upward. "These lead straight into your bedroom vent." I felt the blood drain from my face. "No, that can't be. It's deliberate," he said firmly. "Whatever's in those canisters has been entering the air you breathe while you sleep." My knees weakened, and I clutched the stair rail to steady myself. Images rushed back, Maris standing over the renovation crew, telling me to relax, not to meddle, smiling in that easy way she had. "Don't worry about the details. Mom, it's all taken care of." I had believed her. grateful she'd stepped in when I felt overwhelmed by contractors. Now those words burned like betrayal. I wanted to scream at Diego, to tell him he was wrong, that he was misreading everything. But the blinking timers didn't lie, nor did the sour chemical tang in the air. Diego touched my elbow. "We can't stay here. Not another minute." I let him guide me back up the stairs, each step heavier than the last, until we emerged into the kitchen, where sunlight suddenly felt foreign. Together, we crossed the threshold and stepped out of the house that had been my refuge for 40 years. The diner smelled of bacon grease and burnt coffee, but I barely noticed as I slid into the booth. Diego sat across from me, his toolbox resting beside his legs as if he couldn't bear to let it out of sight. His face was serious, but his tone remained calm, almost gentle. "What I saw down there isn't an accident," he said. "It's a system meant to release substances into your air supply. You've probably already been breathing them." I felt my hands tremble against the chipped mug of coffee the waitress set down. I thought I was just getting older. Lately, I've been so tired, my head pounding some mornings, forgetting where I put things. He leaned forward. "Those are symptoms. Fatigue, headaches, foggy memory. They line up with slow exposure. We need to document everything. Dates, what you felt, any doctor visits. A record could save your life." His words pressed against my chest, heavier than the steam rising from my mug. I thought back over the last year, the afternoons when I'd had to sit down halfway through gardening, the nights when I'd woken dizzy, blaming the weather or age. I'd told Maris once that I was worried about my memory. She had smiled thinly and said, "It's normal. Mom, don't stress." A sharper memory surfaced, one I'd buried under daily routine. 3 months ago, Maris had set a stack of papers in front of me. "Just bank updates," she'd said brightly. "Routine stuff, sign here." I'd signed without reading, trusting her. Now, in the clarity of this awful moment, I realized the forms had been more complex. The signatures, the notary stamp. It must have been power of attorney. I pressed my palm against the table, trying to steady myself as the betrayal seeped in. Quiet and undeniable. Diego's eyes searched mine. "We need to be careful. She may already think you're too weak to notice what's happening." The words struck deep. But I knew he was right. Something inside me shifted then, fragile faith splintering into suspicion. And I felt the first bitter seed of betrayal take root. Diego insisted on returning to the house alone. I waited at the diner, the coffee growing cold in front of me, my fingers restless on the rim of the cup. Every tick of the clock on the wall made my stomach tighten. When he came back, his face told me everything before he even sat down. He set his phone on the table and slid it toward me. The screen glowed with photos, close-ups of the device in the basement, the canisters, the wires, the timers, but it wasn't just the machine he had captured. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, spiral-bound notebook. I found this hidden inside the detergent box by the washer. My hands shook as I opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Maris's neat, looping script. Page after page was filled with dates and short notes. March 2nd. Mom dizzy after lunch. March 15th. Headache lasted 3 hours. April 6th. Forgot to water roses. Memory slipping. The words swam in front of me. She had been recording my decline like I was some sort of experiment. Diego lowered his voice. While I was inside, I heard her. She was on the phone. He hesitated, then added. She said, "She's slipping. If she resists, we'll use Plan B." I felt the blood rush to my ears. Plan B. What does that mean? I don't know, he admitted. But it doesn't sound like something we want to find out. Anger surged through me, sharp and reckless. My first instinct was to call her, to demand answers, to shout into the receiver until she cracked. I pulled my phone from my bag, my thumb hovering over her number. Diego reached across the table and pressed my hand down. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried urgency. Don't. If she suspects we know, you'll be in even more danger right now. Silence is your shield. I let the phone slip from my grasp, the weight of it heavy on the Formica table. As the image of my daughter's careful notes burned in my mind, the following morning, I met with Callum Reed. The attorney who had handled my will years ago. His office smelled of paper and polish, a place I had always associated with security. He adjusted his glasses as he laid out a manila folder on the desk between us. Mrs. Wynne, he began carefully, when was the last time you amended your will? Not since Henry died, I answered. Everything was divided between Maris and a local charity. 50-50, just the way we agreed. Callum slid a stapled document toward me. Then perhaps you should explain this. I leaned forward. The header bore my name, my address, the date only 6 months ago. The words blurred as I read them. Every asset, every account, even the house itself, redirected solely to Maris Wynne. At the bottom was my signature, neat and practiced, but I knew with every fiber of my being that I had never signed it. That isn't mine, I whispered. I thought so. Callum said. The handwriting experts will agree. This codicil was filed quietly, slipped into county records. Someone wanted it to look authentic. My stomach twisted as I gripped the arms of the chair. The memory of Maris handing me bank updates months ago flashed bright and sickening. Later, at the bank, a clerk confirmed what I feared. There had been multiple inquiries into my life insurance policy dates, payouts, beneficiaries, always under Maris's name. My signature wasn't required for the inquiries, just her access to the power of attorney I had foolishly granted. That night, when I returned home, Joyce Lynn waved me over from her porch. Her face was hesitant, as if she'd been holding something back for too long. Hester, she said, I don't mean to intrude, but I've seen a man coming to your house late. Big fellow, dark jacket, sometimes after midnight. I thought it was Maris's friend. He never looked neighborly. Evan, I murmured. His name tasted bitter now. Joyce's brows knitted. If something feels wrong. Trust your instincts, I thanked her, though my voice quavered. As I walked back inside, the walls of my home pressed close, no longer familiar, only dangerous. The ledger, the forged signature, the whispers of late-night visits, my denial cracked wide open, and I saw what I hadn't dared admit love had been measured against what I was worth on paper. When Diego asked to check my bedroom vents again, I thought he was being overly cautious, but within minutes. He motioned me closer, his brow tight with worry. Wedged behind the vent cover, no bigger than a matchbox, was a tiny black lens. A camera, he said flatly. I felt my stomach hollow out. They hadn't just poisoned me. They had been watching me, tracking my coughs, my sleepless nights. Every time I pressed a hand to my temple, the thought of Maris sitting somewhere, studying my decline on a screen, made my skin crawl. We carried the camera to Dr. Lena Park, a toxicologist Diego trusted. She studied it carefully, then reviewed samples Diego had collected from the canisters. Her verdict was steady, but devastating. These substances suppress the immune system slowly, mimicking natural aging, fatigue, headaches, memory problems they'd worsen over months. Left untreated, the outcome could be fatal. Her words left me cold. I had been living inside a slow-motion coffin. Back at the motel, my phone buzzed. A message from Maris lit the screen. "Where are you? Send a picture." I stared at it, heart pounding. She wanted proof. Proof I was where she expected. Still pliant. Still predictable. My thumbs trembled over the keyboard, but Diego stopped me. "Not yet. Any reply can give her your trail. Stay quiet." Minutes later, Joyce called. Her voice was hushed, urgent. "Hester, I saw that man again, the one in the dark jacket. His truck has been circling near the main road." "Evan." I pulled the curtains tight, my breath shallow. It wasn't enough that my daughter had taken control of my air and my money. Now she wanted my movements too. The world outside my motel door no longer felt like refuge. It was another trap waiting to close. And in that moment, I realized silence alone might not be enough to keep me safe. The voicemail came late in the evening. Maris's voice breaking into sobs. "I need you, Mom. Please. I can't do this alone anymore. Just come home. I promise. Everything will be different." The sound of her crying twisted something in me. No matter what I had seen, she was still my daughter, and hearing her beg reopened wounds that had never healed. Against my better judgment, I agreed to go. Diego drove me back, but pulled into the driveway with his jaw tight. "I'll stay outside," he said, pressing the record button on his phone. "If anything happens, I'll have it inside." The house was eerily quiet. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood as I moved toward the staircase. That was when I caught it, the acrid scent of scorched wiring, sharp enough to sting my throat. I froze, then glanced toward the stair lift Henry had installed years ago. The outlet beside it was blackened, the plastic cover warped. Crouching closer, I spotted a small device tucked neatly behind it, a timer with wires snaking into the wall. My chest tightened. This wasn't neglect or bad luck. It was staged a fire waiting to happen, timed for when I'd be alone. I stumbled back, gripping the banister to steady myself. When movement drew my eye, a tiny red light blinked from the basement vent, barely visible. Another hidden camera. My heart pounded as I realized what it meant. They weren't only poisoning me, they wanted to catch me in flames and watch it happen from outside. The wail of sirens cut through the night. Panic rose in my throat. Through the kitchen window, I saw Maris in the yard, wild-eyed, fumbling with her phone. Evan bolted toward the street, his dark jacket flashing as he disappeared into the shadows. Maris turned toward the house, her face twisted in fear, not for me, but for herself. She must have realized the evidence was already in motion. The camera Diego had placed earlier in the basement was rolling, capturing her flipping switches, sealing her own guilt. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs as the sirens drew closer, the sound of betrayal and justice arriving together. The house became a crime scene before dawn. Police combed through every corner while I stood on the porch, wrapped in a blanket one of the officers had draped over my shoulders. From the vents in my bedroom, they scraped samples that later tested positive for chemical residue. Downstairs, they pulled the notebook Diego had found from the evidence bag. Its pages filled with my decline, documented like research notes. On Maris's laptop, a file surfaced, a digital draft of the codicil that had rerouted everything to her name. My forged signature stared back at me from the screen. By the end of the week, the scope of their scheme was no longer rumor or suspicion. Evan's financial records revealed nearly $100,000 owed to loan sharks. Threats of broken bones and collection visits appeared in text messages. And Maris, left with nothing after her divorce, had tethered herself to his desperation. The two of them weaving a plan where my slow death would buy them a new life. When the trial began, months later, I walked into the courthouse with Diego at my side. Maris wouldn't meet my eyes. Her once proud posture was replaced with the stiff, defensive stance of someone already cornered. Her defense came out sharp, rehearsed, and cruel. "My mother suffers from paranoid dementia," she told the jury, voice quivering with false pity. She imagined devices, conspiracies, poisoning. She trusted a plumber over her own daughter. For a moment, the words clawed at me. To be painted as delusional by the very child I had cradled felt like a second attack. But then the evidence began to speak. Photos of the device behind the furnace, lab reports confirming the chemicals, the footage from Diego's hidden camera showing Maris flipping switches near the wiring, all of it built a wall too strong for her lies to climb. The jury watched in silence as the pieces fit together. The story of a daughter who had turned her mother's home into a cage of slow death. When the verdict was read, I sat still, my hands folded in my lap, hearing the words that would finally bring this chapter to a close. The courtroom silence still echoed in my memory months later, though by then the gavel had long since fallen. Maris was sentenced to 20 years, with the possibility of parole after 12. Evan received 25. Their names were printed in the papers, their faces in the news. But I stopped reading after the first week. I couldn't bear to see my daughter reduced to headlines. Even if she had earned every word, I sold the old house soon after. The walls carried too many ghosts, the sound of dripping water, the faint tang of chemicals, the image of blinking timers behind the furnace. Letting go was harder than I admitted, but I knew I couldn't heal inside a place built to be my grave. With the money, I bought a small apartment overlooking the harbor. The windows faced east, where the morning sun painted the water in honest light. From that new beginning, I founded the Win Fund, a modest trust dedicated to seniors who, like me, discovered betrayal inside their own families. Callum helped draft the papers, ensuring that the fund could never be manipulated by greedy hands. Every month, I received letters handwritten, trembling words from strangers who thanked me for helping them escape loneliness, theft, or abuse. Each letter reminded me that survival could be turned into service. Life, while quieter, also became fuller. Diego visited often, sometimes with his children in tow, their laughter bouncing down the narrow hallways. Joyce brought roses from her garden, insisting I plant them on my balcony to keep the old spirit alive. Together, we sat with cups of tea, the scent of salt water and flowers mingling in the air, and for the first time in years, I felt peace settle inside me without fear. I still thought of Mary's. Some nights, I saw her as a child again, tugging at my sleeve, asking for stories. Other nights, I saw the woman she had become, her eyes fixed not on me, but on what I owned. Both images cut deep, but I learned to breathe around the wound. I once mistook blood for love. Now I know respect is the air that keeps us alive. And I ask you, if betrayal wore your child's face, would you forgive, or finally, breathe free?